everyone, welcome to the Kingdom of Pinfall. It's me, Michelle, and we are now on chapter 14 and episode 14. And I have not read this chapter since I wrote it, so reading it again now will be the first time that I've read it. I don't think there's any accents in it. There is some violence. I don't think anyone dies. That's really it. I don't have much to say this week. I do know that next week is going to be an interlude episode and not one of the main chapters from this tale, but it will be another Pinfall related one. I will tell you about that at the end. Please don't forget to check out my link tree in the episode description. This time of year, I'm super busy because I also knit hats, and I have tons of already made hats in my Etsy shop, but it seems that everyone that wants a hat wants it in a color that I don't have. So I spend a lot of time making hats in other colors for people. And that's also kind of why I haven't been doing all of the sound effects in the episodes. I hope no one is too hurt by that. I will get back to doing that when I have more time to spend on editing after I record. That's it, really. Let's go. Chapter 14. The one where Mandy Rose saves everyone by hitting dudes in the dick. Mandy snatches up her wand from the floor and casts one more fireball toward Dolph's face, just for good measure. He ducks, and it explodes into the wall behind him, leaving a crater of black soot in the stone. She then sits down on the edge of the bed, shoulders slumped forward and hands dangling between her knees, exhausted. Physically, mentally, magically, and every other way she can think of. "I'm so confused," he says, his voice cracking. It sounds like he's on the verge of tears, also exhausted and very frustrated. "I can't believe you thought I would actually kidnap you. I know I can be sort of an asshole, but I wouldn't kidnap you unless you wanted me to, which is what I thought was going on." "So what exactly are the details of this plan that you thought I had come up with? Start at the beginning and let's try to make sense of this." She sighs and shakes her head. Her rage has subsided for the most part, replaced by the stark awareness of how tired she is. She wants to continue being mad, but she can't quite figure out who to be mad at exactly. It doesn't make sense. None of this makes sense. She's as confused as Dolph, and it has made her very tired. Or the fact that she hasn't slept and has been trying to escape Nonstop for almost 2 days straight has made her tired. "Are you done trying to kill me?" he asks her nervously. For now. She looks around and for the first time realizes that she has completely trashed this very nice room that had been prepared for her because this was supposed to be a fake kidnapping. Dolph approaches her apprehensively. He picks up the toppled desk chair and sits down several feet away from her. He clears his throat. "Corbin sent me and Rude, his right-hand men and most trusted champions, to Suplex City to handle various royal tasks. One of which involved receiving a message from an ally telling us how we could get the SmackDown men's tag team belts of power from the New Day. The message was from you via Sonya, but I guess maybe not?" "There's no maybe. It was most definitely not for me at all," she snaps at him. "Was it from Sonya, though? Really? Why?" She was beginning to get a headache. He cowers away from her and says, "Well, everything happened exactly like we were told it would. You all were heading toward Raw and crossing the plains where we were told you would be crossing. Then you came over so I could use you as a human shield to distract—" "Fuck no! No one wants to be a human shield! I didn't want to be a human shield and for you to drag me through the portal away from all of my friends. I came over so I could try to talk you out of being an idiot without yelling across a field. Idiot!" Now she is yelling at him, and he is 5 feet away from her, in a room in a castle instead. "Oh," he cowers again and covers his face with his arms, expecting some sort of attack. "I'm sorry I held that knife to your throat then. My bad." She does not forgive him. She does not forgive him at all. She asks instead, what's the end game of this plan? WrestleMania, duh. Defeating the forces of evil like in the days of yore and whatever. He doesn't sound sure. Hero shit. No, not the big grand plan, this little stupid plan that got us where we are now. What happens between my fake kidnapping and the WrestleMania? She walks him through it as gently as she can muster given the situation. Sonya gets a group to come rescue you. They team up with Roman, but then she splits from them, joins us, and we kill all of our rivals. He shrugs and sees her glowering at him. He covers his face again. She says nothing, but also doesn't attack him. He waits a few moments and then slowly peeks between his arms. She is still just sitting and looking at him, her lips pursed. She's holding onto her wand so tightly that it looks like it may snap in two at any moment in her fist. Why exactly are we killing people that also want to defeat the forces of evil? Why? She questions him very calmly, so calmly that it makes him uncomfortable. I don't know. He really doesn't. He was just doing as he was told. I thought this was your plan, remember? I thought you were a spy for Corbin, I guess. He isn't sure about much of anything. He hides again behind his arms, this time wrapping them tightly around his head. He tries to make himself as small of a target as possible, but his hopes are not high. Mandy gets to her feet, the bed creaks. Dolph nearly wets himself. He closes his eyes, waits for his death, and it doesn't come. Very slowly he opens one eye and moves his arms away. Mandy is standing in front of him, tapping her foot. I want to talk to the king, she says. There's no need for us all to kill each other when we're on the same side, you morons. We can surely come to an agreement. No, he shakes his head. Corbin isn't seeing anyone. He hasn't. It's been like some days. He's real mad that Roman and his people are still camped outside of the ring. Take me to see him, Dolph, she says between her teeth. I'm a spy for him, apparently. Surely he'll want my secret spy information about his rivals. Okay, right. He gets up, nearly knocking the chair over again. He catches it and clears his throat. He's probably in the throne room. Come on. He leads the way and looks over his shoulder repeatedly at first, afraid she's made a run for it while his back is turned or is preparing to kill him by conjuring a horrific fire spell. There isn't much he could do about either, especially as they start to ascend the spiraling staircase. It's not very wide and the stairs are very steep. Some of the lights on the wall are flickering. Corbin doesn't do an awesome job with castle upkeep. Most of the help quit when he became king, and his only allies are Ziggler and Rude, it seems. They reach a landing and Dolph veers off through a doorway. Mandy follows and asks, Did you ever stop to think about any of this? Wonder momentarily if it made sense? Seriously. No? It seemed like a good idea, is his answer. Mandy is about to start screaming at him, but she does the opposite and closes her mouth instead, letting out a low guttural noise like some horrifying primordial beast rising from the muck of creation. Dolph is not so confident and brave without his flail and frost mage buddy in a bathrobe. There's no need to keep yelling at him. He looks at her, then looks away, and places his hand on his chest. I'm sorry, truly, from the bottom of my heart. Oh, shut up, she grumbles and rolls her eyes. Take me to Corbin and tell me how you and Rude know how to use the belts of power. He turns quickly and starts moving again with a tremble. It's not that hard. I guess it depends on the belt, though. They just sort of work if you believe they'll work, like magic. Well, that sounds stupid. How did you find out? She questions. Dolph answers, Corbin knows. He knows a lot about the belts. He found some VHS tapes. What about opening portals? She asks and studies her surroundings as they begin descending a different set of stairs. The throne room is on the main floor. She knows this much. She's supposing he took her on some sort of shortcut. The best she can guess is that her guest room was on the 4th level of one of the towers. It was too high for her to jump out of when she attempted that particular escape. That's for sure. This doesn't really matter, as she has no intention of returning to the room, but she does want to get a feel for the ancient structure for her upcoming escape that she intends to succeed at. The portals are a little trickier, he tells her, looking over his shoulder to make sure she hasn't bolted. He seems surprised that she's still there each time. You have to know exactly where you want to go, and then, call on the belt, he answers. I don't know exactly how opening the portals between worlds works, like the heel gates or whatever. I'm sort of afraid Rude is going to accidentally let more of the forces of evil in if he keeps playing with his belt and portaling all over Pinfall. She grunts a vague agreement at this sentiment. For a moment, she feels bad for Dolph. He really does want to save Pinfall. The moment is brief because he continues talking and goes on to say, It's a shame we're going to have to kill all of your friends. Otis is probably in the party coming to save her, which means Tucker has tagged along as well at the very least. And Sonya, of course. The possibility that Sonya has betrayed them all and is leading heavy machinery into a trap makes her skin crawl. She shudders. She doesn't need to be rescued. She'll damn well rescue herself given enough time to do so. She figures she doesn't have all that much time now because she needs to rescue her rescuers. They reach the ground floor and she starts to recognize her surroundings. She's been in the castle of the King of the Ring before, but not beyond the main areas of accommodation for feasts and parties and the like. The throne room, the banquet hall, and the ballroom. The huge oaken doors of the throne room are closed and everything is dark. Much darker than the last time she was here. There are also a lot of cobwebs that she didn't recall being so plentiful prior to the ascension of Corbin. Dolph knocks very lightly on the door and says to Mandy, I was joking, by the way, about killing your friends. Yeah, okay, she says, then shoves him out of the way to knock on the door herself, and not the little dainty knocking that he was doing. She pounds her fist against the wood and yells, Corbin! There's no answer from the other side and no sound at all when she listens. She decides to give the doors a push and finds that they swing inward easily, not even locked. Dolph was knocking out of respect or politeness or fear of the king. The throne room is wide and flanked on either side by rows of pillars. The carpet leading from the doorway to the throne is torn in places and stained. The throne itself sits empty. Mandy walks in, illuminating the room with a bit of light from the end of her wand. She realizes after a moment that Dolph has remained in the doorway. She's about to ask him where Corbin is when he begins closing the doors. He doesn't look at her, and his face disappears as the crack between the doors shrinks to nothing. Then she hears the lock fall into place, and all of her previous rage returns. What the fuck, Dolph? Is what she ends up screaming at the top of her lungs. As she does so, the light from the end of her wand gets brighter. She turns back toward the throne and sees a hulking figure rise from behind it. Mandy, 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 Corbin chides as he comes toward her. He strokes the arm of the throne as he passes it, and then comes slowly down the steps, his fur-lined cloak dragging behind him. He walks very deliberately, and then stops on the final step in front of his fancy chair. He's already substantially taller than her, but the step gives him another several inches of height. He says, I think there's been a misunderstanding. You think? She resists the urge to light him on fire, but does begin to prepare her magic. She's curious about what he has to say, and she wants to get to the bottom of all this. Maybe he has more useful information. There's no need to get snippy about it, he tells her. These things happen. We can make it right, I'm sure. Oh, really? Mandy asks and takes a step closer to him so that she can clearly see the hilarious plastic crown he's wearing. He glares and goes on. I was under the impression you and I were on the same side, but clearly this is news to you. I guess Sonya assumed you would see a reason once you got here, but you haven't. You've just been torturing Dolph. It's not too late to join the winning team, though. He extends his arms as if to hug her and says, I'll gladly let you join my court. How do you know about the belts? She asks him, completely ignoring everything he said. Dolph mentioned VHS tapes. Corbin sneers. When you become King of the Ring, you gain access to a great deal of knowledge. Knowledge is power, is it not? Mandy scans the room. She knows there's another way out, but it's behind the throne, past Corbin. The way she came in is closed and locked, presumably being covered by Dolph on the other side as well. She mutters, How wholesome. Wow, you're being very difficult, he says back to her in the same sarcastic tone she keeps taking with him. It would be such a waste for me to have to kill a perfectly good fire mage. Do you even understand what's happening? You need to be making allies, not killing them and trying to hoard all of the belts of power. She doesn't know why she's trying to reason with him. She can almost actually see everything she's saying go into one ear, bounce around in his empty skull, then exit. She keeps going, though. You and 2 henchmen don't stand a chance. What are you doing? Trying to be the only survivor so that the Titan of Pinfall has no choice but to make you into a god? I am making allies. You and Sonya will be my allies. He says this to her like it makes perfect sense, like she should understand whatever faulty logic is behind it. Why would I side with someone that's trying to kill all of my friends? She asks him. He shrugs his broad shoulders. I'm not going to kill all of them, just the ones I don't like. Corbin, she begins calmly, and then she screams at him. Have you completely gone insane? I am the king, he yells back at her. I know more about all of this than you and all of your little friends combined. You're the one that has no idea what's happening. He flails his arms and then points to his right. Look at this. Watch this. He laughs spitefully. There's a whirring noise and a screen unrolls from the ceiling and falls into place. A black and white film begins to play. It's jittery and unfocused at first, but then the picture stabilizes. Mandy can make out people moving around in a group, but little else. Do you know what this is? Do you see this? Corbin asks her excitedly and just keeps pointing. No, she answers him with uncertainty, but continues to watch. Also moderately curious on top of her rage and exhaustion. The people slowly come into view, and she starts to recognize some of them. She asks, what exactly am I looking at? Keep watching, he urges exuberantly and giggles a little. The sound is jerky and the volume keeps fluctuating, making the dialogue hard to follow. But she sees a meeting taking place in the very throne room where she now stands. It is brightly lit and furnished. This was from the height of the King of the Ring. She can make out the King Bret Hart, along with Triple H, who has already experienced his apotheosis, and Randy Orton, who she realizes hasn't aged at all. There are others present, other champions. She can see their belts of power glittering in the background, but can't quite see who they are. She tries to count the belts and sees that almost all of them are there. She assumes all of them are present, and she just can't see them because they're off screen. The Dreadlord Brock Lesnar emerges along with the Titan of Heel, in the flesh, Paul Heyman. He is followed by Hulk Hogan and Ric Flair. She squints, trying to make sure of this, and she mumbles, "What?" Corbin shushes her, although the sound is barely audible, and says, "Keep watching!" "I don't know what I'm looking at, Corbin," she says, annoyed, then observes as some contracts are signed. The signing is being overseen by Jerry Lawler, who now owns a pawn shop in Suplex City. "I found those contracts," he tells her. "I found hundreds of VHS tapes too, like this one. Everyone thought the WrestleManias weren't real. Thought it was all just stories, legends. They were real, but none of what you think is true is actually true." She raises an eyebrow. What did they sign, and why are Hogan and Flair with Heyman? This doesn't make sense. "Exactly!" he exclaims. A pact was made between the forces of evil and the champions and the gods and the titans at the end of the last WrestleMania before the gods all left Pinfall. Mandy thinks Corbin has gone insane, assuming he had ever been sane to begin with. He was always a little off. She asks, "What exactly are you trying to tell me?" "Listen to me, Mandy. All of this stuff was in a secret room, but that's not important. That's not the important part, Mandy. What's important is that you were on the right side during the WrestleMania," he insists. He sounds fairly earnest about it, and as she did with Dolph, she feels sorry for him briefly before remembering that he plans to kill all of her friends. She rubs her temples and groans a little. She feels like Corbin wants her to ask. He's baiting her, so she says, "And what was the pact they made in this little home movie?" "I'll show you," he tells her. But before this conversation can progress, and before he can produce the contracts, Dolph comes barreling through the doors, which crash thunderously into the walls on their side of the entrance. They swing wide open and he falls down onto his knees, panting. There's a faint white aura around him that is pulsing with each breath. He gasps out, "The Usos have breached the walls, just beside the main gate." Corbin storms past Mandy, forgetting all about his important historical discoveries. He yells at Ziegler and points toward her. "Don't let her escape. We need her." But Mandy has already made a mad dash toward the back exit. It should lead her down a corridor to the kitchens, and then she can get out through the scullery. At least she thinks so. She makes it through the doorway and raises up a wall of fire behind her. She hears Corbin shrieking like a madman, and Dolph pleading in a high-pitched voice that he doesn't like being set on fire. Corbin says something about using the belt and rattles off some profanity. The last thing she hears clearly is Corbin saying, "Go after her, you idiot." She wonders why Corbin is bent on keeping her alive when he's perfectly happy to kill anyone coming to rescue her aside from Sonya. Something in the tapes, she guesses. There's no time to find out, though. Corbin shared something with Sonya that must have been pretty fucking mind-blowing. "Sonya," she growls and looks back over her shoulder to see if Dolph is following. When she turns toward the front again, she plows into Rude, who materialized in her path coming through a belt portal. The man grabs her shoulders and greets her. "Hello, Mandy." He smiles and drops one hand to her wrist and points her wand away from him, seeing her putting it into position. "No need for that." "Let me go, Robert," she says. He sneers and grabs her wand, then snaps it in front of her and lets the two halves clatter to the floor. "Silly girl, we don't want you burning the castle down." She raises her knee between his legs and it collides with his balls. With a loud oomph, he lets her go and she shoves past him as he doubles over. She makes a few quick motions with her hands and he is engulfed in flames. "Silly boy," she grumbles. "I don't need a wand to set things on fire. You should know that. You're a mage too." Rude's wails of pain spur her onward. She makes it through another door, but it looks like it leads inward, toward the courtyard. She backs out quickly and dashes into the next door, which is indeed into the kitchens. She tears across the room toward the back, knocking over dusty pots and pans as she goes. She's making a ton of noise, but there doesn't appear to be anyone around. She doesn't really care. The room is in such a hellish state that knocking everything over makes little difference. With another quick hand motion, the burners of each of the stoves come alive with blue flames that roar toward the ceiling. Then she ignites the doorway with another wall of fire. Dolph stumbles through a portal and comes crashing down into a stack of plates. He yells, "Oh my God, you are setting everything on fire. Why?" He scrambles to his feet and is up long enough to muster a commanding voice and shout, "Mandy, stop!" Mandy rushes toward him instead and hits him in the chest with all of her weight, knocking him down onto the broken plates again, breaking them even more. She makes it to a door and opens it to find a dark pantry full of food that looks like it was from several WrestleManias ago, and she lights it on fire. "Fuck this whole castle," she complains. Dolph gets up again and dives toward her with a very sloppy tackle. She ducks his arms and sends her elbow into his groin. He falls to the floor, bleeding from the shards of plates and moaning helplessly while he clutches himself as the fires continue to grow and smoke starts to fill the room. She rips open the other door and is hit by daylight. She pauses to get her bearings. She's somewhere behind the castle, northern side, she thinks, but isn't sure. She hears faint yelling and battle noises, so she goes that way. Other people are running away from said noises, but she needs to get to the Usos, get out of the ring, and rescue her rescuers. She also needs to punch Sonya in the face. Her thoughts circle back to Sonya, and she wonders how the fuck Sonya got turned against her and when. She isn't really against her, she realizes. She's just mysteriously siding with Corbin and is okay with sacrificing her friends for something. She lights a dumpster on fire and then some bushes, and she wants the whole damn castle to go up in flames the more she thinks about it. She doesn't care what Corbin found in his secret room of VHS tapes. A moment later, she finds herself at the castle walls that stop the peasants from plowing in and assassinating Corbin. She doesn't see a gate on this side, but she sees a trellis. There used to be a nice garden here, but the gardeners also quit as well. With an annoyed groan, she starts to climb it to scale the 10-foot wall. When at the top, she sees crowds of people confusedly moving away from the noise in varying states of panic. She sees smoke rising from that direction as well and realizes she's heading for the main gate, which is the direction she wants to go. None of the townsfolk notice her until she jumps down from the wall and begins pushing against them. Struggling against the flow of people for several blocks, she finally makes it to the fight. The Usos are engaged with the Miz and John Morrison. A mob of peasants also seems to be fighting another mob of peasants. She isn't really sure what's going on. "Jimmy! Jay!" She calls for them, but neither hears her over the screaming and clashing of weapons. So she climbs on top of a toppled carriage. The main gate is still closed, so she wonders how they got in, but there isn't much time to wonder because she needs to get out. She lights it on fire, forgetting her exhaustion and forgetting that the source of her magic is not infinite. Flames begin to spew from her palms like jets of water from hoses, and they pummel the big wooden structure, igniting the wood and causing it to warp and crack. They notice her then. Everyone notices her then as she stands above them all, summoning hellish magic over the heads of civilians, including King Corbin, who has arrived at the scene still wearing his plastic crown but now flailing a scepter erratically. Jimmy and Jay exchange a glance, and Jimmy says, "Looks like Mandy is going to do our job for us." Jay shrugs and swings a net toward Morrison. "That's fine. As long as someone gets that gate out of the way." Jimmy also shrugs and jabs his trident toward Miz, who sidesteps it and begins twirling a sling over his head. He releases it and sends a stone toward Jay that misses by several feet. "Mandy!" Corbin bellows, looking horrified. He's more horrified that Mandy made it out of his castle and is burning down his gate than he is that the Usos somehow scaled the massive walls of the city. She slowly moves her hand in his direction, dragging one of the torrents of flame away from the gate and across the ground. She sets fire to buildings along the way, and more people begin to scatter in terror. This breaks up one of the frays that was happening in the street. Without a wand or some other means to channel her magic, it is much stronger and more dangerous, harder to control. It's irresponsible, but she doesn't care. "Get out of the way!" she yells at some of the city folk. "Stop the mage!" Corbin attempts to give commands to Miz and Morrison as he dives out of the way of the fire stream. "I'm a little busy here," Morrison says as he is tangled in Jay's net and Jay approaches him with a trident. He swings his two little swords wildly against the ropes, entrapping him as Jay approaches and starts poking at his feet with his trident while he laughs. Miz hurls another stone toward Jay. This one hits Jimmy in the side of the head. The man turns and snarls at him, but then goes back to tormenting Morrison, affected little by the puny attack, although a tiny trickle of blood begins to form at the point of impact. "Get Mandy! Get the mage!" Corbin keeps yelling as he has to run to escape the fire, and he's quickly running out of places to go as much of the ground is ablaze. There's a thunderous crack as the gates begin to collapse. This causes Corbin to let out a shrill scream. "Shit! Shit! Shit!" Dolph yells as he runs toward Mandy, but he is forced to stop as he approaches a large expanse of fire. Dolph's damage resistance shield has been depleted and he doesn't dare attempt to walk across fire. A cracking and hissing noise rings out, and steam begins to noisily rise from patches of fire as Rude throws ice spells at them, attempting to extinguish some of the flames. His shield is also depleted, and there are some burns on his arms, and his robe has a few burn marks. He casts out sparkling jets of ice from his free hand as he holds his axe in the other, similar to Mandy's seemingly unstoppable fire streams, but it isn't enough for the absolute destruction unfolding around them. As the gates start to crumble and Mandy can see the other side through the flames and smoke, she shifts her right hand toward the Usos and Miz and Morrison. "Jimmy, get out of the way," she tells him. "I'm Jay," he responds. She spreads the flames closer to him and realizes that other fires she started are beginning to encroach on her perch atop the carriage. "I don't care. Move!" The two brothers abandon the netted Morrison and run toward one of the few areas that isn't on fire. Miz heads toward Morrison and begins trying to free him, terrified as the fire approaches. Just before the flaming current reaches them both, a huge wall of ice emerges. The fire collides instead with the ice wall. It hisses and begins to melt. But as it melts, it keeps refreezing. Mandy looks back toward Rude, who has dropped his axe and begins summoning his own unbridled magic to protect the two men from her. "Mandy, the whole city is going to burn if you don't stop," Dolph yells at her frantically. "This whole quarter is on fire. Stop!" She pauses long enough to look at what she's done. It's like the mess she made in the guest room that had been prepared for her at the castle, but a million times worse. Flames are roaring, ash is blowing, smoke is everywhere, beginning to blot out the sun. She hears people coughing and weeping, yelling for help. She stops. The way is open. She just has to get there. She has to cross the hellscape she created and reach Roman's camp. She sees it. She sees the tents, and she sees Roman's army. They're standing around waiting for something. Jumping from the carriage, she starts to make a beeline toward what's left of the burning gate. Immune to fire herself, she just needs to run straight there, faster than the men trying to stop her. The Usos realize what she's doing and exchange another glance and a shrug. It helps that Corbin begins yelling, "Someone get Mandy!" Jimmy dives into combat with Rude, and Jay heads for Miz and Morrison, holding his trident like a lance. Dolph dances around the flames and can't get anywhere. Corbin goes running, weaving and ducking, intending to handle business himself. When she is about halfway to the gate, he catches up and makes a leaping dive into her. The two go tumbling and rolling over one another. When they come to a stop, Mandy finds herself on top of Corbin but tangled in his cloak and arms. She struggles to get free, throwing elbows and knees in every direction. Corbin drops his scepter and Mandy knocks off his crown. She slaps him and he tries to get a grip on her, but she won't stop moving. He's also tangled in his own cloak, such that he doesn't have full use of one arm. Mandy gets an arm free and slaps him again. She's running on adrenaline, and all she can think about is getting out before anyone stupidly tries to rescue her. She punches Corbin in the jaw and then drives the heel of one foot into his chest, trying to get leverage and push herself off and away from him. He grabs her ankle with one hand, and she kicks him under the chin with her other foot. Mandy manages to half push, half fall off of him as he releases his grip on her to grab his own face instead. She slings off the last of his robe that's touching her and gets up. She's so close to her goal, and the king is wiggling around on the ground, whining. She snatches up his scepter and then throws it down toward his dick. With a pained cry, he folds it onto himself. She begins running again and doesn't look back. She has to climb over shards of gate and jump to other seemingly safe portions to make it out. She charges through the last wall of flames and out into the open outside of the ring. "Mandy?" Roman cocks his head to the side when he sees her, ripping through the smoke. She runs up to him, then comes to a stop and leans forward, putting her hands on her knees. She says nothing and comes to grips with her exhaustion again, and properly this time. She reaches up and grabs onto the front of the large man's shirt to stop herself from keeling over. "My peach!" a familiar voice shouts. "Otis?" She mumbles, but as she attempts to look up, the world spins and she falls into his arms. The flames continue to rage inside of the main gate. Corbin regains his senses and whimpers as a huge buzzard begins circling him. He lays there on the hot cobblestone, struggling to breathe in the thickening smoke. Ash from a now non-existent building blows by him. Some of it burns him and creates pockmarks in his cloak. He continues to lay there, looking at the bird as it circles lower and lower. He isn't dying, but he feels like it. A hand appears in front of his face, obscuring his view of the buzzard. It is extended to help him up. On the hand is a black glove with the words "heal" across it. Alright, thanks guys, that's it for this week, and if you catch that bit there at the end, guess who's now in play? And guess who that buzzard is? There was a lot more profanity in this than I remember, so I think this is gonna have to be an explicit chapter. I thought it was just some violence and dick punches. Yeah. Next week, the interlude episode is one that I know at least one person is excited for, maybe two people? Maybe? It is called The Legend of Lana and the Potato Golem. It's pretty much unrelated to this main story. I mean, they might have a run-in with Lana and or the Potato Golem at some point. Probably the Potato Golem. I don't know what to do with Lana. Thanks again for listening. I hope no one's super disappointed by the lack of sound effects. I'm going to get those going again, hopefully soon. And that's really all. This was a fun chapter. It's one of my favorites. And I have written some other chapters after this, but they're not the chapter that comes after this. Things have to happen in a certain order, you know what I'm saying? And join next week for a fun side story about Lana and a potato golem. Thanks everyone, and goodbye.